Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show where we really get into the nuts and bolts of the gear you love. We don't just skim the surface.
No, we like to trace the family tree, pull things apart, figure out why certain pieces of kit become legendary.
And today, oh boy, we're going deep, like sub-bass deep. We're talking about maybe the most iconic, compact Octave effects series ever.
Has to be the BOSS OC series, right? That sound of just thickening everything up, guitar, bass, you name it.
Exactly. We're talking sub-octaves, those cool synth-like layers. This is the sound that defined fat tones for decades.
And it's such a cool story because it's not just about one pedal. It's about this 4-decade chase. BOSS trying to perfect this seemingly simple idea, dropping the pitch down an octave or two.
Right, and it's this constant battle, isn't it, between that old-school, warm, slightly unpredictable analog vibe.
And the super clean, reliable, do-anything precision you get with modern digital stuff.
Okay, so let's lay out the mission for this deep dive. We're going chronologically, starting way back in '82 with the absolute legend, the OC2.
The analog OG.
Yeah.
Glitchy charm and all that.
Then we jumped to the OC3, which was a huge shift, right? Going digital, getting polyphony.
Yeah. The super octave changed the game for chord work.
Then there's this interesting kind of detour, the OC20G, the big twin pedal.
Ah, yes, the ambitious one. Maybe a bit too ambitious for its time. We'll see.
And finally, bringing it all together, the current OC5, which tries to be the best of all worlds.
That's the idea, yeah. Precision meets vintage modeling.
So that core theme keeps coming back. Analog warmth versus digital power. Soul versus science, maybe?
That's a good way to put it. It really is like the whole history of effects pedals condensed into this one series.
Right, no point waiting. If we want to get this, we have to start at the beginning, the one that started it all.
The OC2 octave. So 1982. You got to remember, octave effects existed before this, but they were often pretty clunky, big boxes, rack units, maybe a bit unreliable.
Not exactly pedal board friendly stuff.
Not at all. The OC2 was really the one that nailed putting a proper, deep, almost synth-like sub-octave into that classic BOSS compact pedal format. Suddenly everyone could get that sound.
And that sound. When people talk about the OC2 sound, that thickness, that warmth, it really comes down to the fact that it was analog, doesn't it? Like physically messing with the electricity.
Absolutely. It wasn't thinking about pitch like a digital chip does. It was using pure analog circuitry, specifically these things called flip-flop frequency divider.
Flip-flops. Sounds simple.
In concept, yeah. Basically, think of a little electronic switch. Every time a full cycle of your guitar note's waveform comes in, the switch flips its state, like on, off, on, off.
Okay.
So if your note is, say, 100 hertz, it completes 100 cycles per second. The flip-flop flips 100 times. But if you look at the output of that switch, it only goes through a full on-off cycle half as often.
So 50 times per second. 50 hertz.
Exactly. You've just divided the frequency by 2. That's your octave down. It's kind of brute force electronics.
And for the second octave down.
Just feed that first divided signal into another flip-flop divider, divides by 2 again. So you get your original note 1 octave down and 2 octaves down, all generated by this physical process.
Which is why it sounds so connected, so organic.
That's the theory. It feels tied to the fundamental vibration because it is directly derived from it. And they used a full wave rectifier too, which smoothed out the edges of the square wave the flip-flop creates, adding to that round, warm character.
And all that sonic power controlled by just 3 knobs. It's kind of brilliant in its simplicity.
It really was. Focused design. You got direct level, that's your clean guitar sound.
Yeah.
Then Oct1 for the volume of the first octave down, and Oct2 for the second octave down.
So you could blend them however you wanted.
Precisely. Bass players, especially, just cranked those octave knobs to get this huge earth-moving foundation.
Now, something practical for anyone hunting down an original OC2. The power situation was a bit different back then, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, that's a classic vintage BOS thing. It ran on a 9V battery, sure. But if you wanted to use a power adapter, you needed the specific BOSS ACA adapter, not the modern PSA ones.
Why was that?
Those older ACA pedals were designed for a slightly higher voltage and, crucially, were often unbuffered. They expected to see the specific impedance from the ACA adapter or from being part of a chain powered by one.
So plugging a modern adapter in might not work right.
Correct. Unless it's in a daisy chain with a modern buffered pedal that sorts out the voltage, an old ACA pedal like the OC2 might seem underpowered or not work correctly with a standard PSA supply. It adds to the whole vintage quirkiness, you know?
Quirks are definitely part of the OC2 story. Let's talk about the sound, because it's not just famous for being warm and thick. It's famous for well, misbehaving sometimes.
Ah, yes, the legendary glitchy charm. This is fundamental to the OC2 experience. Remember those analog flip-flop dividers?
Yeah.
They were designed for monophonic tracking. That means they work best tracking one single note at a time. A clean, simple waveform.
Okay, so lead lines, single note bass lines. Fine.
Pretty much, yeah. But the second you play a chord, or even a really fast, complex run with lots of harmonics, the poor little divider circuit gets totally confused.
It doesn't know which frequency to divide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It starts jumping around, sputtering, trying to latch on to different fundamentals or harmonics. It creates these weird, unstable, sometimes dissonant sub-octave sounds. That's the glitching.
And somehow, what sounds like a massive technical flaw
Became the sound. People loved it. That slight instability, that sort of soft, almost blooming attack on the octave note, it felt really organic. It wasn't perfectly precise like later digital stuff.
So it had personality.
Yeah.
But you had to learn how to handle it, right? There were tricks to get the best out of it.
Oh, definitely. Players figured it out. Rule number 1, give it the cleanest signal possible. Neck pickup often worked best, fewer complex harmonics. Roll the tone knob back a bit on your guitar.
Simplify the input waveform.
Precisely. Feed it a nice, strong fundamental. If you hit it with tons of distortion before the pedal, forget it. The tracking just falls apart. All those extra harmonics and compression just confuse the dividers.
But you could put distortion after it.
Absolutely. That was the key trick for aggressive sounds. You take the relatively clean, warm, maybe slightly glitchy square wave output from the OC2, and then you slam it into a fuzz or distortion.
And that creates
that massive, synthy, almost gated fuzz sound. Because you're distorting a relatively simple, strong, low-frequency wave, not a complex guitar signal, it turns the OC2 into a monster.
Which leads us right into its cultural impact. This wasn't just a utility pedal.
No way. It became a foundational tone. That specific, warm, slightly rubbery, synthy suboctave was everywhere. Guitarists used it constantly for instant bass lines.
Think about Prince, right?
Yeah.
Using it on songs like Kiss. That super deep, funky bass sound under his guitar.
That's classic OC2 territory. Probably neck pickup, maybe tone rolled off, letting the pedal track that fundamental, and then maybe hitting an amp or console just right.
Or, more recently, bands like Royal Blood. The whole bass sound is essentially an OC2 or something very similar, slammed into fuzz pedals.
Exactly. Taking that core OC2 octave down signal and mangling it to create this huge sound that covers guitar and bass territory simultaneously, it just proves the power of that core tone.
So the legacy is huge. It's not just an effect, it's almost an instrument in itself, defined as much by its limitations, its imperfections, as its strengths.
Absolutely. Those imperfections are its soul. And they set the stage for everything that came next as BOSS tried to keep that soul but fix the perceived problems.
Okay, so that OC2 soul, that warmth, that glitch, that's the benchmark. But by the early 2000s, those limitations, especially the monophonic thing, were becoming a real issue for players, weren't they?
Totally. Guitar styles were evolving. People wanted to use octave effects on chords for thicker rhythm sounds, and the OC2 just couldn't play a chord and it would just freak out.
So BOSS needed a solution. How do they get around that fundamental limitation of the analog dividers?
They took a big leap. In 2003, they released the OC3 Super Octave, and the key change was moving from pure analog to digital signal processing, or DSP.
So a computer chip inside doing the work.
Essentially, yeah. It still had an analog input section to keep the initial signal nice and clean, but the actual generation of the octave notes was now calculated mathematically by a DSP chip.
And that digital brain could do things the analog circuit just dreamed of.
Precisely. The headline feature for the OC3 was that it was the world's first compact pedal to offer polyphonic octave tracking.
Meaning it could handle chords.
Yes. The DSP could analyze the complex waveform of a chord, identify the different notes being played, and then calculate and add the correct octave below each one simultaneously. No more glitching just because you played more than one note.
That's huge. Suddenly, rhythm guitarists could use it.
It completely opened up the effect. You could play a full chord progression and have this clean, solid octave layer underneath. It brought the octave pedal into the modern era, really.
And they added some other practical features too, didn't they? Like an input selector.
Yeah, that was a nice touch. A little switch for guitar or bass input. This basically told the DSP algorithm what kind of frequency range to expect.
So it could optimize the tracking.
Exactly. Tailor the processing for the low fundamentals of a bass or the more complex mid-range harmonics of a guitar. Just a smart quality of life improvement made possible by the digital brain.
But the real flexibility came from the different modes it offered. It wasn't just one sound anymore.
Right. The OC3 gave you 3 distinct options via a mode knob. First, obviously, was the new polyoctave mode.
That's the chord tracking magic.
That's the one. Clean, tight, reliable, octave below on chords. It just worked. It was the polar opposite of the OC2's sometimes chaotic behavior.
Okay, mode 2 was the drive mode. What was that about?
Well, remember how players loved running the OC2 into a fuzz or distortion?
Yeah, the classic aggressive synth tone.
BOS basically built that idea into the OC3. The drive mode added an internal distortion circuit to the octave sound, so you could get that gritty, synthy, aggressive tone right out of the one pedal.
Convenient. Yeah, how did it sound compared to using a separate pedal?
Opinions were a bit divided. It was definitely convenient, but some found the built-in digital distortion maybe a little harsh, or perhaps less complex than driving a really nice analog fuzz pedal with the octave signal. It was good, but maybe not quite the same magic as the OC2 plus fuzz trick for some purists.
Okay, understandable. And the third mode, this was the nod to the past, right?
Exactly, the OC2 mode. This was BOSS using the DSP to digitally model the sound and behavior of the original analog OC2.
The digital recreation, the million-dollar question. Nail it.
Well, this is where that analog soul versus digital precision thing really comes into focus. It was a good emulation. It definitely captured the warmth, the general character of that monophonic behavior. For many players, it was close enough. And you got the convenience of the modern pedal. But for the real hardcore OC2 fans, maybe it lacked that last tiny bit of chaos. That subtle unpredictability in the tracking, the way the analog components interacted. Digital modeling was good in 2003, but maybe not quite perfect at capturing all the nuances of vintage analog circuits yet.
So the OC3 was this bridge. It gave you the modern polyphony everyone wanted, the convenience of built-in drive, and a very decent shot at the classic OC2 sound.
Absolutely. It was a necessary step forward. It made the octave effect way more versatile, especially for rhythm players. It cemented BOS's place as leaders in pitch effects by, managing to blend that classic analog heritage with really useful digital innovation. It was the standard for nearly 2 decades.
Now, this is interesting. While the OC3 was becoming the new standard compact octave, BOS was also working on something much bigger and more complex around the same time. Starting in 2003, the OC20G octave twin.
Yeah, the OC20G is often the forgotten middle child, isn't it? Part of that bigger twin pedal series BOS did for a while. Think of the DD20 Giga delay, stuff like that.
Right, the double with pedals with more knobs and foot switches.
Exactly. And the OC20G wasn't aimed at the average player's crowded pedal board like the OC3 was. This was designed as a serious, professional-grade, multi-octave machine for stage and studio. More power, more features.
You can tell just by looking at it. Bigger footprint, 2 foot switches.
Yeah.
Definitely not for the minimalist setup.
No way. That size was functional, though. The dual foot switches were key for switching between different sounds or presets instantly in a live show. And like the other twin pedals, this thing was purely digital DSP.
And needed more power, presumably.
Yep. Unlike the compacts that could often still run on batteries, the OC20G required the proper BOSS PSA adapter. That complex DSP engine and all the extra circuitry just needed more juice and stable power.
Okay, so what made it a multi-octave processor? What could it do that the OC3 couldn't? This is where it gets really interesting, right?
This is where the OC20G was kind of ahead of its time. It wasn't just 1 octave down, or maybe 2 like the OC2. The OC20G could generate up to 3 simultaneous octave voices layered with your original signal.
3. So what were they?
You got the standard 1 octave down and 2 octaves down, just like the OC2. But crucially, it also added an octave up.
Whoa, okay, that changes things completely. That's not just thickening the low end anymore.
Not at all. Adding the octave up turns it into this massive, harmonized, almost organ-like or 12-string guitar-like sound. You could create these huge synthesized ensemble textures.
Sounds like it would need more controls than the standard 3 knobs.
Oh, it did. You had your direct level, controls for octave 1 down, octave 2 down, and the new octave up. But then you also got knobs for drive, tone, balance between the voices, and significantly, a range knob.
Hang on, a range knob, like controlling which notes get the octave effect.
Exactly. This was an early version of a feature that would become really important later on the OC5. It let you specify the frequency range that the octave effect would be applied to.
So you could say add octaves only to the lower strings of your guitar and leave the higher strings clean.
Precisely. Or maybe just have the octave up effect on the higher notes for a shimmer. It was designed to help manage the potential muddiness of layering so many octaves, giving you much more surgical control.
Very clever. And the connections, the inputs and outputs, were they more pro level too?
They were. It had stereo outputs, I believe, and definitely a dedicated direct output alongside the affected output. So you could easily run wet-dry rigs, send your clean guitar to one amp and the massive layered octave sound to another, or run stereo effects after it. Really flexible for stage and studio.
So with all this layering, octave up, drive, range control,
Mm-hmm.
what was the overall sound character of the OC20G? Was it warm like the OC2?
Not really, no. The descriptions usually focus on it being broad, full, hi-fi. It was about creating these big, clean, synthesized textures, or aggressive, distorted synth sounds using the drive. It was less about organic warmth and more about sonic power and flexibility. Think clean tracking, complex layering, and maybe a bit more digital sounding than the OC2 or even the OC3's OC2 mode.
Given how advanced it sounds, why did it only last about 5 years? From 2003 to 2008? Seems like a short run.
Yeah, it probably was a bit niche, the complexity, the size, the higher price point. It likely appealed mostly to session players or touring pros who needed that level of layering and instant preset switching. Maybe the mainstream market wasn't quite ready for that complexity in an octave pedal background.
Yeah, it wasn't a dead end technologically.
Oh, absolutely not. Its significance is huge in hindsight. It was BOS's first big multi-voice octave processor in that twin format. It really showed off what their DSP was capable of years before those kinds of features became more common. You can see the DNA of the OC20G's advanced pitch engine and layering ideas popping up later in things like the BOSS, SY synth pedals, and the big GT multi-effects units.
So it was a stepping stone, even if it wasn't a huge seller itself.
Definitely. Perfect for someone wanting to simulate bass parts while playing guitar, or needing instant access to wildly different complex octave textures live. A powerhouse, but maybe just a bit too much too soon for most players back then.
Okay, let's jump forward. After the OC3 had its long run and the OC20G explored the complex high-end, BOSS eventually circled back to the compact format. They took everything they'd learned, the love for the OC2's analog soul, the need for the OC3's polyphony, maybe some control ideas from the OC20G, and mashed it all together into the current flagship, the OC5 Octave, which came out in 2020.
That's exactly the narrative BOSS presented.
Right.
The OC5 is meant to be the culmination, the synthesis. The goal was clear. Give people that authentic OC2 analog vibe and give them state-of-the-art polyphonic tracking all in one bulletproof compact pedal.
So still digital DSP at its core.
Oh, yes, definitely digital, but using their latest generation DSP and what they call advanced pitch detection algorithms. We're talking much faster processing, lower latency.
Yeah.
The tech has come a long way since the OC3 in 2003.
And that translates to better tracking. That's always the holy grail with octave pedals.
That's what everyone reports. The tracking on the OC5 is consistently described as flawless, instantaneous, natural. It handles complex signals, fast playing, different instruments, much better than previous generations. That kind of reliability is crucial for pros. You just can't have your octave pedal glitching out or lagging behind mid-solo.
And the modes reflect that goal of combining old and new, right? They simplified it back down compared to the OC3's 3 modes.
They did. Back to 2 core modes, but each highly refined. First, you have the vintage mode.
The OC2 recreation again.
Exactly. But this time, leveraging much more sophisticated modeling technology, BOSS really aimed to capture not just the tone, but the feel and the monophonic tracking quirks of the original OC2.
So it still glitches a bit if you play chords in vintage mode.
It's designed to. They understood that the flaw was part of the magic for many players, so you get that lush, warm sub-octave, the slightly soft attack, the monophonic behavior. But benefiting from modern low-noise circuitry, so hopefully the authentic tone without the vintage hiss or power supply headaches.
Okay, so that covers the retro side. What about the modern side, the poly mode?
This is the evolution of the OC3's polyphonic concept, but again, using the newer, much more powerful DSP engine. The polyphonic tracking is supposed to be even cleaner, more stable, and more natural sounding across the whole range of the instrument compared to the OC3.
So better handling of complex chords, faster response.
That's the promise. Quieter operation, less latency, just a more refined and reliable polyphonic experience for rhythm work or adding subtle doubling.
But the really killer feature on the OC5, the thing that seems to borrow from the OC20G's ambition, but makes it way more usable, is the return of that range knob, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is probably the single biggest practical innovation on the OC5, especially when using the poly mode.
Remind us what it does again.
It allows you to set the cutoff point for the polyphonic octave effect. Basically, you turn the knob and it determines the lowest note that will have the octave added underneath it.
So you can play a full bar chord, but tell the OC5, hey, only add the low octave to the E and A strings, leave the D, G, B, and high E strings clean.
Precisely that. It's incredibly powerful for avoiding that low-end mud that can sometimes happen when you add an octave below everything. You can keep your bass notes thick and heavy, but maintain clarity and articulation in the higher parts of your chords or melodies.
That seems game-changing for guitarists trying to integrate octave effects smoothly.
It really is. It gives you surgical control over where the octave sits in your overall sound, making it much easier to blend into a band mix without just turning everything into mush. It's taking a complex idea from the OC20G and refining it into a super intuitive single knob.
And presumably, being a modern BSS pedal, it has all the usual practical advantages.
Yeah, lightweight, standard 9V PSA power, quiet operation, buffered bypass, all the things you expect for seamless integration into a modern pedal board, where space, power, and noise floor are always concerns.
So it sounds like the OC5 really does try to live up to that promise, balancing the soul of the OC2 in vintage mode with the modern control and precision of the poly mode, enhanced by that range knob.
That's the goal. It aims to be the definitive compact octave by offering both the authentic, modeled analog tone and state-of-the-art digital precision side by side.
Is there any potential downside? Anything the purists might still point to?
Well, it comes back to that fundamental difference. Even the best digital modeling, it's still a calculation. Some might argue it inherently lacks that tiny element of chaotic, unpredictable, organic interaction you get from raw analog components pushed to their limits. When something is designed to be potentially perfect, does it lose a sliver of that analog danger or mojo?
The philosophical debate continues. Hashtag tag tanking conclusion and final takeaways.
So looking back across these four pedals, OC2, OC3, OC20G, OC5, it's just a fascinating story, isn't it? It shows how chasing a musical need, like getting a fatter sound, really pushes the technology forward, sometimes sacrificing a bit of old character for new utility.
Yeah, let's quickly crystallize those key steps, just the essence of each one.
Okay. The OC2, that's the analog archetype, pure analog division. Its keywords are warmth, thickness, vintage character, those dual sub-octaves. And its defining feature, or flaw, depending on how you see it, is that monophonic tracking.
Right. Then the OC3, the digital pioneer, moved to DSP. Its big contribution was polyphonic tracking, plus the versatility of the drive mode and the first attempt at an OC2 emulation. Tone, clean or gritty, focused on function.
Then the OC20G, the ambitious digital outlier, the twin-pedal powerhouse. Its focus was massive layering up to 3 octaves, including the octave up keywords, wide, modern, flexible pro features like range control and presets, a glimpse of the future.
And finally, the OC5, the modern synthesizer of it all, advanced DSP, delivers authentic OC2 emulation in vintage mode, plus super precise poly mode tracking, refined with that crucial range knob, tone, either authentically classic or clinically precise.
And through all of that, you can see the thread, right? That core desire for those fat suboctaves, that core sound the OC2 established. Each generation just added more control, more reliability, more options, expanding what you could do with that sound, moving beyond the limits of that original 1982 circuit.
So for you listening, trying to figure out which octave pedal philosophy fits you, what's the practical takeaway? How does understanding this history help you choose?
It really clarifies the choice. Are you prioritizing character or control?
Explain that.
If you want that pure, slightly unpredictable, organic analog warmth, if you love that monophonic glitchiness and use it as part of the sound, and if you mainly play single note lines like bass or synth leads, then you prioritize character. You either hunt down an original OC2 or you get an OC5 and keep it firmly locked in vintage mode.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the other side.
If you're a rhythm guitarist needing clean octaves under chords,
Yeah.
if you need absolute tracking reliability for professional live use, if you want that surgical ability to control exactly which notes get the octave effect so it sits perfectly in a mix, then you prioritize precision and control.
And for that, the OC5 is the clear winner.
Using its poly mode and that fantastic range control, yeah, it offers a level of accuracy and finesse that the original analog designers could only have dreamed of. It's a superior tool for complex, modern applications.
So the choice reflects that core tension we talked about right at the start. Organic flaw versus digital perfection. Exactly. And that brings us right to our final, maybe slightly provocative thought to leave you with.
Okay, let's hear it.
Given that the OC5 now offers such a sophisticated and, by most accounts, incredibly faithful digital model of the OC2 in its vintage mode, does that slight, maybe even immeasurable unpredictability of the original analog circuit really matter more?
More than the flawless tracking, the polyphonic power, the range control of the modern digital approach.
Yeah. When we talk about loving the imperfection of the OC2, the glitching, the monophonic nature, are we appreciating a genuine part of its musical soul? Or are we maybe just romanticizing the limitations of older technology now that we have something potentially better?
Is the soul in the flaw itself or just in the classic sound it happened to produce?
Something to ponder, definitely.
Indeed. Plenty to think about the next time you stomp on an octave pedal and feel that rumble. Thanks for diving deep into the BIS legacy with us.
Always a pleasure. Until next time.